Mike.
Hello and welcome to Mike's on Mike. My name is Mike Miller, and I'm here with a couple of real veterans from the political world. Mike Hightower, who will explain who he is in just a moment, and Mike Tolbert. Guys, here we go.
Hey, Mike. How you doing, buddy?
Good.
How are you doing, Mike?
Episode number 1. Here we go.
Okay.
Let's start out with you, Mike Hightower. Give everybody an idea of your background in this and when you got started. I mean, I know that you started with, or at least didn't start with, but you were very involved in the Jimmy Carter Florida campaign.
Correct.
But that was not your first venture into
My
this.
first adventure was in 1971, which would be 52 years ago if my math is right. Jimmy Carter.
You were only 9 at that time, weren't
Yeah,
you?
I was. I wish. It was 71, January 10th of 1971. So President Carter was in 70, met him in 74. He was my 4th or 5th candidate I got involved. Before somebody makes them, I always say if it hadn't been for Jimmy Carter, I wouldn't be here. And you can imagine the following line that says that. Having said that, make no apologies. You got to remember in 1974, when they were looking to run for president, Jacksonville was the state headquarters for George Wallace. So to me, this was not a hard decision to be supporting President Carter. And so from that, and given that, and over the years, I've been involved, and a lot of this will be with Mike Tolbert as well, 6 mayors, 7 governors, and 4 presidents.
Wow.
And then, so fast forward, here we are, about 500 candidates later, and I love what I do, enjoyed what I'm doing, and it's been a great run, and I have fun with it.
And when did you meet this guy?
Well, I want to ask a question first.
I knew this was coming. I knew this was coming.
No, I've always known you as an incredible fundraiser.
Right.
Tell me, give me a ballpark figure on how much money you have raised over these 50 years for political candidates and campaigns, whether it's referendums or whatever it happens to be.
Ooh. Wow.
About $153 million.
I'm not surprised.
$153 million.
I am shocked that people still take my calls. And probably after this, nobody's going to take my calls after that.
Do you want to tell us how many dollars of that $150 million went to winners and how many of them went to those that didn't win? What was your record? Wins and losses?
Probably seriously, the 4 years that I was chair of the party, we had 8 back-to-back straight wins.
Okay, I just heard somebody in the audience say, what years were you the head of the party?
203 to 207 during John Payton's campaign.
Okay.
Yeah, and Mike, basically, if you don't raise that kind of money unless you have winners.
That's true.
Losing does not perpetuate that kind of money.
Yeah, and of course, for those who don't realize, my day job during all this time was I was the vice president for government relations for Blue Cross Blue Shield, which is one of the reasons why I'm here. They helped me provide those resources because in fundraising you have to give before you can ask, and because that was my job both in Tallahassee and Washington, so Blue Cross was very interested in making sure that their policyholders got good policy, and so they allowed me to participate in that process, which allowed me then to help support candidates. So it's a team effort in that, and for people who want to know about lobbying, call me sometime and I'll give you the idea. But, thanks to Blue Cross and a lot of friends, and people still took my phone call. It's been fun.
Yeah, it has.
It has been fun.
And as far as your accompaniment or your acknowledgement of Mr. Tolbert here?
I did not meet Mr. Tolbert until 1975 in the office of the then chairman of the Democratic Party, and Mr. Tolbert was not impressed with me. He kept calling me Mitch.
Nothing has changed.
Yeah, and he still doesn't get my name right, except that there's a 4-letter word in front of that. But over the years, we have become great friends, and and that's what you find. What's in politics? You find the best and the worst in people. And believe it or not, we've not always agreed. But when it comes to Jacksonville, Tolbert and Hightower, we tend to be 99% on the same side.
Let me tell you, Mike Miller, about that meeting in the Democratic chair. It was 1975, and I was running Mayor Tanzler's re-election campaign. And back then, you have to remember there were no Republicans. Everybody was pretty much a Democrat. And back in those days, if you qualified for mayor as a Democrat or running for council or whatever, you had to first pay a fee to the party and then go to the courthouse and pay a fee to the state. Mm. And the fee you paid to the party was supposed to go into a pot. And that pot was then supposed to be divided by Democratic candidates who had Republican opposition. Well, Hans is the only one that had one.
So he got all the money.
And he paid $900 to the party to qualify.
Wow.
Hamowitz sent him a check for $400. And I said, you're not going to accept that. And I would have walked across the street to the Blackstone building where Hamowitz's law office was. I walked in, and the mayor made me take Harold Gibson with me, so it would be somebody with diplomatic skills. And there was Hightower sitting at a desk in the back corner. That was my first memory, and first time I ever saw Hightower. And God Almighty, I wish it was a lad.
Now, Hamowitz was the Democratic chair at the time, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Who, by the way, went to federal prison.
And I think I had, that was 75, so I was still then the secretary of the Democratic Party. So I was sitting there. So, of course, Mike's comments about what we were or not doing with that was, so he looked at me, Mitch, we want our money.
I didn't call him Mitch.
Yes, well, okay, it was close.
And then 20 years later, you and I met.
Yeah, 20 years later we met. That was
95.
1995, and I was running Mayor Godbold's campaign for.
Yeah.
Actually, it wasn't for re-election. He decided to run a third term.
Right.
For a third term because he didn't want Mayor Missouri to get re-elected, and so But anyhow, it got to the general election, and Mike was, of course, the big shot in town on the radio. And he was blasting Jake every day on the radio for not showing up.
Right.
Because Jake became disinterested in running because Missouri was out.
Yeah.
So once Missouri got defeated, John Delaney was left, and he liked John Delaney, and he didn't really want to be the mayor. So he didn't show up. So Miller is blasting his butt every time. So one morning, one afternoon I called his producer at WOKV, and I said, I want to be on the radio with Mike in the morning at 8:00 to talk about this. And he said they love that. And so
now they didn't say anything to me about it. They made the decision.
So anyhow, I
rating must have been during ratings.
So we got on the radio, and I said, "Now listen, Mark." And he said, "My name is Mike." I said, "Okay, Mark, you haven't been in town very long. You don't know very much about Jacksonville." And then for a few years after that, I still called him Mark every time I saw him just for fun, but I don't do that anymore. Out of respect.
See, now you believe the story about him calling me Mitch. See,
that's exactly right.
There's a consistent behavior here.
I thought it was only my grandmother who didn't know she was talking to most of the time.
Let me ask you something.
Yeah.
In radio, you've interviewed a lot of people. Talk to us about that. You've been to Chicago, Detroit?
Detroit, yep. I was in Detroit. I was in Hartford. I was in Miami. I was in West Palm Beach. Here, of course, and Gary, Indiana, which is where I started.
And if I remember correctly, you were one of the first people to ever have a one-on-one, not only with President Carter, but with Mrs. Carter.
I did.
Which is,
as a matter of fact, I had 2 interviews with Rosen Carter. One was in Orlando during the campaign, and the other was when she was First Lady, and I was broadcasting in Hartford, and I did a monthly show called Ask the Governor with Ella Grasso, who I absolutely adored. She was just amazing. And we were coming up to our first-year anniversary of Ask the Governor, and she invited me over to the mansion, and we were having lunch, and she said, "Mike, what do you want to do for our anniversary?" So, typical flippant me, I said, "Well, what's Jimmy doing?" And she said, "That's a good idea. Let me find out." So she then called me back next day or so, and she said, the president is busy, but Mrs. Carter would like to do the show with us. So I said, that's terrific. So Rosen flew in from Washington, did the show with me, with Ella, and it was a wonderful experience. And then I saw Rosalind again. I interviewed Jimmy Carter 4 times, twice before the election and twice after the election. Tremendously friendly guy, just a wonderful guy. And I'm so sorry to see his health declining as it is. But I still to this day feel, and it's not because I got to know him, which I was really very honored to do so, but I think he was one of the most underestimated presidents that we have had in our time. When you take a look particularly at the Israel-Egypt peace accords, that has held, for 50 years now. That's quite an accomplishment. It really is quite an accomplishment.
Accord.
I'll tell you a quick Jimmy Carter story. When I was working for Tansler, Carter wanted to interview me, wanted to talk to me about going to work in his campaign. And back at that point of the campaign, it wasn't going so good. Money wasn't flowing in and that sort of thing. And I had a job. We had lunch over at the Blackstone building in the jury room. And I remember saying, I was thinking, this guy can't win. But I was really thinking, I want to keep my job. I don't want to let go of it right now. And so I declined his wonderful offer. And Lord help, what happened? He won.
Yeah.
Without me.
That's all right, Marty. You did a good job. Just to show how things happen, I gave up my job working at the school board to run his campaign for the November election.
Wow.
Talking about rolling the dice. And I had a son. My son was 8 months old, and that was the only way I could run the campaign, and I did it. So, in politics, which we're going to be talking about, you never know.
Why don't we get onto that politics talking?
I think that's kind of a good idea.
What the reason why we're here?
That's exactly right. And one of the reasons why we're doing this program today the way we are is because obviously we have a brand new mayor. We've got some new city council members. There are going to be a lot of changes on the 4th floor of City Hall. And we thought that this would be a great venue for the 3 of us, 2 really political experts, in my opinion, with experience behind them,
Just
to be able to
guys.
do their observations. Well, that too. We're all in that area.
Senior.
The seniors. Maybe we should change.
Vintage.
That's right.
Vintage.
Maybe that's what we should call this: the seniors on Mike instead of Mike's on Mike.
Well, we're bad enough to believe that because of our institutional knowledge, we have some insight that we can share.
That's a nice way of saying that Tolbert and I are really still legends in our own mind.
As we all are. But with that issue, let's talk a little bit about why we think that Mayor Deegan was as successful as she was in this campaign, because obviously she went against, she was like a salmon swimming against the current on this one.
Well, let's put it in perspective. The first woman mayor of Jacksonville.
Yeah.
When you think about it, it's pretty phenomenal.
And that's why they call it history making, I think.
Absolutely.
I think that's probably. As you pointed out, this was an historic election. Tell me what you thought about the campaign.
Mike, I'm gonna tee it up. Seriously, go ahead.
Well, I was one of those, like so many others, most everybody, I think, when this thing started, that said she can't win. There's no way she can overcome the Republican surge that keeps going on in this area. And no way, by then Davis had already amassed a great war chest. And the odds just seemed terrible. Not that she wasn't qualified, talented, had the ability to win, but the odds were just incredible. What we've learned about Donna Moore as the campaign went on, most of her life she's had to fight against pretty significant odds, so that doesn't discourage her or deter her. She put a campaign plan together, it seemed to me, and stayed with it. And that was, this is going to be a people campaign about making change and about the future. And I think that's what people wanted to hear. She was able to marshal a hell of an army of volunteers to get out in the community. She went everywhere. I was had a meeting with a big Republican donor during that campaign, and he told me, he said, let me tell you something. I've got to support the Republicans, but I may end up voting for her. She called me. There's a small group of wealthy Republicans that meet every once in a while, and she called me and wanted to meet with us. And I said, but be careful what you wish for. And he said there were 9 of us in the meeting, and when she got through that day, 6 of us were going to support her, going to help her. And so I think she did a lot of that. She was not afraid to go face to face with anybody. She went everywhere she could to get somebody to listen to her, and it paid off. And people were ready for change. I don't think there's any question about it. I think maybe I told both of you guys. It seemed to me the morning after the election, we felt like we'd been under a dark cloud for 8 years, and all of a sudden there was sunshine. And boy, what a difference. I mean, the whole community felt lifted up to me. But I think if she just outworked, and she kept consistent with what she was doing.
Well, let's go ahead.
I totally agree with everything that Mike said. But, you know, the other part, successful politics is the art of differentiation. Everything that Mike has talked about 3 or 4 key points. She had this vast army. She had a headquarters. She met with people. She went everywhere. The other campaign was run off of a laptop. It was...
That's the way you do it now.
Well, it was, but it also was... Let's talk about what people are saying. It was a terrible... She had her message. It was about living here, what she knew from her family, from the Great Fire, and it was a positive message. The other side, and I'll lay you odds that those Republicans who said they were going to support her, is the campaign had become one so negative. Not only about what they were saying about her, which first and foremost was totally inaccurate, but it became offensive, it became divisive, and it started making people who have lived here, and Mike and I and some of us have lived here, when Jacksonville was not a nice place, when it was a very segregated and there was a lot of divisiveness, and we heard those messages coming back. And I really believe, and she said it in her speech, you know, people understood the difference between fear and hate and love and inclusion. And I'm one of the folks that I enjoy listening to, and I don't always agree with his policy, is Paul Begala, who was a Democratic consultant, and he worked for for the Clinton. But he has a quote, and it was like made for this campaign, and I'm going to read it. And I'm going to paraphrase it because I did add a word or two. The problem with the last campaign and some of the candidates or their consultants or both lost sight of the difference between strategy and tactics. And I really believe that people became offended and disgusted by the tactics in the last campaign. And you had a person who was talking about unity and love and that we need to work together, and something that was divisive and negative and was inaccurate.
And the Davis campaign had a failed strategy.
Well, that's right. They had tactics. Yeah, they didn't have a strategy.
And then, starting about 2 weeks out from the election, I had some opportunities to meet with a number of Davis's big supporters, and it was consistent what I heard. You probably heard the same thing. They thought Daniel was going to win, but at the same time, they were very apprehensive and afraid that if he did, he was going to govern like he ran a campaign, which they said was not him. It was somebody else. It was his consultants, and they would be around, and they were fearful about what to do.
Well, it's about numbers in campaigns, about election returns. There were 3 countywide elections, but let's take the 2 that were the most important. You had Donna versus Daniel. She won by 8,500 votes. In the at-large, you had Chris Miller running against young Garrison as the Republican. He won by 9,000 votes. So to that part where underscore what Mike said, there were a lot of people who thought, I have to do this, or I thought I did, but when it came to making a decision, you almost had the same amount of people who switched over. which when you listen to her thing, she said the city gets it.
Why don't we hear what Donna said about why she won?
And see if we're right. I doubt seriously.
As we celebrated on election night, I was overwhelmed by the convergence of people from across the political spectrum who, with one voice, rejected fear and claimed love as our way back. This is the Jacksonville that we can become together. How do I know? Because in a time of great political division, in a world that so often gives in to cynicism, despite the pundits and the proclamations that money and entrenched power are the inevitable victors, you chose love, the highest power of all.
I think that we discussed prior to listening to the mayor speak on that about what our thoughts were as far as why she won. There was another thing, too, that I think really clicked with people, and that's when she talked about a new day in Jacksonville. So let's hear what she had to say about a new day in Jacksonville.
It truly is a new day in Jacksonville, a new day where we demand transparency, inspire optimism, and embrace opportunities for everyone. A new day where creativity, commitment, and collaboration will define our city government.
One footnote I'll put to that, and as I mentioned to you guys before, I was at the inauguration and I was sitting in the bleachers. I was in the cheap seats. And I really didn't mind it because I was there with the regular folk, and I was watching more of their response to her as well as listening to what she was going to say. I got to tell you, it was almost cult-like the way people reacted to what she was saying. The people sitting around me, and again, there were dozens, they were applauding in non-applaud lines. They were standing up and cheering before that line came up where one would expect that would be the reaction. She has just uplifted, I think, those that were in the audience, and I know she hopes, of course, that that's going to translate to the entire community. But that whole idea of getting people excited about the future was very evident from my perspective and from where I was sitting and the reaction of the people there. It was really jaw-opening, I should say.
Yeah.
Jaw-breaking.
She spoke from her heart, didn't she, Mike?
There was no question. And in watching her, it was spontaneous and the smile, but you could feel, which she talked about, is Jacksonville is in her DNA. And you can't, when somebody talks from their heart and you see that, it was so spontaneous and it was so accurate. The other thing that, and I again, she talked about optimism, but she also said in her speeches that the voter got it. She talked about the difference about what was and what was going to be the new day. And I really believe, people will disagree sometimes, but there is a reason why Donna won. Donna Deegan won because she had a message that Jacksonville needed to be a new day and a new way that people thought and felt good about their city. And she captured that, and people got that, and that's what it was. And when you say a new day...
But she also talked about a new day being infrastructure.
No question.
Taking care of the roads, doing the things that we've been talking about doing for years and years and years. Now, with the Better Jacksonville
I was
plan,
just going to say, that was what Delaney's message was as well.
Jake paved every road. I mean, they did stuff, but the catching up is so big and so hard. And it's going to be interesting to see if she can actually get that done. There's money there. I mean, Curry passed the gas tax for infrastructure. And I know a lot of people cheered when she talked about completing the Emerald Trail.
Yes.
Because I'm one of those who does believe that'll change downtown and a lot of other places.
Yep.
Yeah. And also, the Emerald Trail is our treasure. It's just like John Delaney's park system. It's very important to that. And the infrastructure. When she talked about, she talked about sewers, she talked about sidewalks, she talked about those basic infrastructures that makes the difference of whether a community, a city is good or bad, or people want to live there. It's a quality of life issue.
Let's hear what she said.
We are poised to rise. To borrow a phrase from black suffragists during the push for women's voting rights, we will lift as we climb, creating a city that ultimately works for all of us. For so long, we have talked about our critical infrastructure needs. Our bridges, our roads, our bulkheads, our drainage, our septic tanks. It's time for us to stop merely talking and make the investments to fix what has long been broken. We owe that to our children and our grandchildren. We will lead on resiliency. It will inform our development and pave the way for smart growth. It is the issue of our time and essential to our success. We will fully fund our riverfront parks and complete the Emerald Trail. Those projects will add to our quality of life, along with a focus on arts and culture, and they will help us to ignite downtown so people will want to invest, live, and play here.
You know, that sounds good. It's the right thing to say. I just hope, again, that she has the ability to do it.
Well, one of the things that she brought up, which I hadn't really heard from other inaugural addresses, is the emphasis that she put on federal dollars and how aggressive she wanted her administration to be to get up to Washington and bring back every federal dollar we can get in our area to help us out with this.
Well, if there's an opportune time for that, it's right now with all the federal money flowing, with the infrastructure bill. Mayor Curry dropped out of the U.S. Conference of Mayors for the last 8 years, which is a shame because that's a great organization for networking among people like yourself and get all kind of ideas. But it's also where the federal government, where the administrations go to help cities. First thing she did before she got sworn in is she rejoined the U.S. Conference of Mayors and went to a conference. And she says that while she was there, the Biden administration people approached her, came up to her and said, "We've got all this money, come get it." And I think that's a decent sign for what's ahead.
Absolutely. I mean, she made the comment, those are our tax dollars. As mayor, as the CEO of your city, you should be at every meeting when they're talking about tax dollars to help bring it home. That is part of your public stewardship. When you ask the people to vote for them, is you become their advocate.
Let's see that video.
Jacksonville has often left federal dollars on the table for other cities instead of bringing them home to make our city stronger and improve the lives of our citizens. That's over. Those are our tax dollars. We will be strategic and aggressive to bring back our share from Washington.
That's a powerful message. That's leadership.
Yep.
That's leadership. I think one of the other things that I was happy to hear, because so much emphasis is trying to buy local and support local businesses and things of this sort, but her emphasis again on small business and wanting to see small business thrive in this city, and the efforts that she's going to put and the resources into hoping that come about. I thought that was very, very impressive, and she talked about that as well.
As I've met with small business owners, the entrepreneurs who create jobs and drive 80% of our economy, I've heard two things again and again. First, it takes way too long and it is too difficult to get a permit. It's a new day. We are not going to have people waiting 2 and 3 years to get a permit to open a business in Jacksonville. Same holds true with procurement. We make it too hard for people to do business in Jacksonville. We will fix permitting and procurement by streamlining the process, adding technology and people if needed. We will create a system that is accessible, quicker, and easier. Our goal, to become the small business capital of the Southeast during my time in office.
That's how we become the small business capital of the
Yep.
state, right there.
Right.
Fantastic. You know, one of the other things that came out in her speech, and I think one of the other things that people, of course, know and love and respect about Donna, you know, is a 3-time cancer survivor. She wants Jacksonville to become a healthier city, and she named a health officer. Let's see that video for a comment.
I want Jacksonville to be a healthier city. Health, both physical and mental, is key to our economic prosperity. We have one of the best medical communities in America here in Jacksonville. Despite that, our maternal and infant mortality rates are the worst in Florida and some of the worst in the nation, and that is not acceptable. We must and we will do better.
Powerful. Very
Absolutely powerful. And when you really think about what Jacksonville is, which she talks about, you think of the health community, both on the private sector but in the nonprofit. With that kind of commitment, and that is a priority, can you imagine what Jacksonville and the quality of life will be with her as an advocate of bringing all of those folks together when she talked about collaboration and coordination? I believe that will really be one of Donna Deegan's legacy, which we need in this community given those terrible statistics. As she said, we've got to do better. It's unacceptable. John Payton used to say, that which gets measured gets done.
It sounds corporate.
Well, it's true, though. It's true. That which gets measured gets done. That's right, it was.
Speaking of corporate, were you guys surprised that she didn't talk at all about our large employers, large corporations,
I
and
wasn't.
address that?
I wasn't. I think my sense was she believes that the corporate folks have a megaphone, but the small business people that are out there trying to get things done don't. And I think that was her point.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, just a real quick sideline is during the time I had the opportunity to be chair of the chamber, 96 point something % of our chamber membership here, as the second largest chamber in the United States, is made up of employers of 25 employees or less. And she understood that because as she talked about her family.
Right.
Small, I mean, Donna Deegan relates to the people who run, live, and love our city.
You know, when she concluded her speech and was bringing that thing in for a landing, she started talking again about inclusion and unity and building bridges throughout Jacksonville. Let's take a look at that clip.
We will build bridges to the people, open wide the doors of City Hall, and invite everyone inside. We will meet you where you are, in your neighborhoods, in your community centers, and during town halls.
Mike, let me ask you something. Mm-hmm. You were in the audience.
Yeah.
Must have been, what, 2,000 people close to it?
At least.
Tell me about the audience. How diverse was it?
I would say that I was probably surrounded, I would say about 40% of the people I was surrounded by were people of color. Very good percentage, I thought. And even when I went to the Friday night celebration ahead of that, the amount of diversity that ended up being there was better than I've seen with anyone, at least in my experience of doing these things. And again, I go back to Delaney and that's it. So everything else is after that. But it was age-wise very diverse. There were young people there in their 20s and 30s, and of course other people who were our age, black, white, brown, yellow, every color under the rainbow that I had recognized. And they were all of single-mindedness. They were all there to support her and to encourage her.
Excited.
And excited.
Yeah, they were
excited.
And I think that's a great nonverbal message that she sent.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that to my core.
Yep.
Yes. and it was embraced, very obviously. Mike, you were there, but watching it on TV, you could sense it. I mean, you could feel it coming through the television.
Well, you could even hear it in the clips that we just played for the viewers, because in the way in the background, I thought that was my section. I could hear in the background. my buddies in the bleachers were really getting going there.
Let's go to the ending, because part of that inclusion, I think, is her sense of the neighborhoods.
Oh, yes.
I mean, she grew up primarily on the north side, I think. I mean, her family was there. That's where they came and had the proverbial grocery store,
Right.
kind of thing.
Above the grocery store.
And but her rattling off those neighborhoods, if you were sitting in that audience that day or watching on TV, you most likely lived in one of those neighborhoods.
Yes.
And it was the rich and the not so rich and the very poor. I think she included everybody.
And you know what else? It kind of reminded me of a show business thing when someone's doing stand-up comedy and they'll say something, okay, who's here from Jacksonville? And, here's here from Ponte Vedra. That's what it was like as she was rattling off those different neighborhoods, because the people around me, every time they hit a neighborhood that the person lived in, they reacted to it. So you had all of this reaction going on.
Let's watch that.
Let's watch this, because I think it's extraordinary.
I think you know this, but I truly, truly believe in this city. It doesn't matter if you live in Brooklyn, Brentwood, in Baldwin, or the Beaches. Whether you are in San Jose, Springfield or San Marco, Arlington or Avondale, Durkeeville or Deerwood, downtown or Newtown, Ortega or Ocean Way, La Villa or Lakeshore. Duval. It doesn't matter if you grew up on Myrtle Avenue or you went to grade school in Mandarin, played on the docks at Mayport or the basketball courts of Murray Hill, or rode on the horse farms of Marietta. It doesn't matter if you are new to town or you have been in Jacksonville all your life. I believe in you. I believe in us. If we will only work together, lift as we climb, choose love over fear, and see each other's humanity, I am optimistic our beautiful mosaic called Jacksonville will become the masterpiece we all desire. Our new day has arrived, and as Bono says, it's a beautiful day. Don't let it get away.
When you go back and listen to the beginning of the speech, when she got to that part and she rattled off those neighborhoods, you know why they got excited? Because she was genuine. She already had them. They already trusted her. They believed her. They supported her. And when she got to that last part, which was, to me, the ribbon on it, when she ran through their neighborhoods and she talked about all those things, every one of them said, that's my mayor. Mm-hmm. It was not about Democrat or Republican. She was our mayor, and it was genuine because she's genuine. And as you all who remember saying, her family, Mike brought it up, her whole family came here after a fire. Jacksonville was in her DNA. They believed it, and they embraced it, and they support her.
No question about it.
I'm tired. Let's call this off.
All right. That concludes our first episode of Mike's on Mike. We're glad that you tuned in. We hope you'll do so every week. We have a lot that we're going to be talking about. We wanted to focus on the mayor's inauguration on this first episode, but after that then we'll be getting into some of the issues that we are going to be facing. We've got the stadium to deal with, we've got the jail to deal with, we've got so many other issues that this mayor is going to have to deal with, along with the other 19 city council members. And we're going to be observing, giving our insights and perception on all of those issues in coming episodes. Thanks for joining us. Take care.
Thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.